Thank you, President Dean, for that very kind introduction. It means a lot coming from you. I have admired your leadership for a very long time and remain forever grateful for your example and the impact that you've had on my life, both personally and professionally. I also want to thank CEO Kevin Hilton for having me here this morning. Probably wasn't an easy invite for him, given my Michigan State slacker background, as he likes to refer to it. But I think I've been here 4 times to these conferences, and Kevin and his talented team always treat me way better than I deserve. I also want to give a big shout out to Co-Chairman Brown on the contractor side. Listen, I'm a building trades guy. And like a lot of us, I think I'm pretty cool, pretty confident. I'm proud of my background, my training. But I recognize without our employers, I wouldn't amount to much. So God bless the contractors that are in the room, those high-minded folks, high-road employers that pay decent wages and benefits. It means a lot to be here in front of you all today. Before we get started, I do want to give you a little bit of a disclaimer. You would figure out in a couple of seconds anyways, but I am not a professional speaker. My speaking fee this morning is $0.00. And you're not going to have to hear much before you figure out that is precisely the right price for me, because I'm not going to talk about anything that you don't already know intuitively or inherently. It might just be stuff that you don't think about. I'm also not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I have no formal training in the disciplines that you would think about that come with talking about something like avoiding burnout, But I do think I have some street cred, and we'll hear about that in a little bit, that sets me up well to talk about this subject. So you may wonder, why are we even talking about this at a conference like this, an impact conference about innovation? The president just hinted at why this is important, because burnout, suicide is a consequence of burnout. But there really are a couple of reasons why this matters. And the first reason is you and your colleagues, the people that you're sitting shoulder to shoulder with in this room, your brothers and sisters, they are part of this team. And you need to be able to recognize what the symptoms of burnout are, how to address them, how to prepare yourself to resist burnout. The famed theologian, philosopher, organist, and Nobel Prize winner Albert Schweitzer, who lived in the 19th and 20th century, noted that if we live long enough, there is a time in all our lives where our own inner light goes dim. And there is usually some outside external person that comes along and provides the oxygen to reignite that flame. So you have to be able to do that for one another. And you're probably sitting in this room next to people that maybe lit that flame in the first place. The next reason we're talking about this is all of you. You are on the team. And we really need you on the field and in the game, operating at your very best from a mind, body, and spirit standpoint, because what we're really talking about here is retention. There are a lot of, I'll probably make more athletic analogies than you want, but again, the previous speaker just talked about, it's harder than ever to retain people right now. And we are heading into a period of extraordinary opportunity, but we need all of you on the field, in the game, operating at your best from a mind, body, and spirit standpoint. There was a chap that wrote a book it's been 2 decades ago now, I think, named Malcolm Gladwell. He wrote a couple of books, one called The Tipping Point, I think. But he wrote this book, Outliers, where he postulates that if you look at anybody that really has a huge story of success, it could be Mozart, it could be Tiger Woods, it could be Alex Ovechkin, could be Bill Gates, could be the Beatles, but they have spent a minimum of 10,000 hours sort of honing that skill. And 10,000 hours in our building trades lives is about 5 years. So it takes 5 years to do something before you get even really good at it. And then we need you doing it for another 5, 10, 15 years if we're going to ultimately be successful. The third reason that I do this is, for me, it's personal. This is a shot from 2007 when I was the organizing director of the IBEW, and at least in my mind, and trust me, I recognize it was probably only in my mind, I was at the top of the game. My trajectory was going nowhere but upward. But shortly after this picture was taken, I began a sickening, sort of nauseating, gut-wrenching, slow decline. And so the reason that I do this, and the reason that you don't get charged for it, is that I don't want what happened to me to happen to any one of you. Because the truth is, when you are of right mind, body, and spirit, when your mental health is good, nothing can stop you from achieving your goals. But man, when something is out of kilter there, almost nothing can help you. And I know everybody won't necessarily agree with this, but I'm going to make the case that you are particularly vulnerable to burnout if you are working in the organized construction industry, because this ain't no 9-to-5 gig. This is movement-oriented work. You are part of a mission. If you can see me on the stage, if you can hear my voice this morning, both on the union and on the employer side, a good part of what you do every day is help ensure that you're providing better wages and better benefits and a better life for people that work in the organized construction industry. And there is a good part of the working workforce out there that isn't dealing with that kind of mission. It's heavy. And it is going on in an environment that is particularly tough. This is a market share or density slide, not wage share, but a density slide for the unionized industry, not just construction, but unions overall. And it is a tough environment. And we are living in a time, I'm not going to try to get too political, but we are living in a time where there's some crazy crap going on. And some stuff that I never thought I would see in my lifetime. By the way, a symptom of stress is being emotional, and you're going to see me probably get emotional, so be prepared. There are also a lot of polarizing figures out here that, despite your political beliefs, just somehow seem to sort of turn up the burner on this division, regardless, again, of what side you're on. People can hardly stand to sit next to one another. It's crazy. We're also in a period where we have just this amplification of news coming at us all the time. And can feel sometimes like a dark period. It feels that way, especially for me, the last couple days with the events going on in Ukraine. But regardless of what your political beliefs are, elections have consequences. And we are going to be living with them in the organized construction industry for a very long time. We're also in an environment where there's increased violence, mass shootings, and the pain and consequence that comes from that. Walk out of this hotel, turn left, walk up a couple of blocks, and it doesn't take very long to see what the consequence of this pandemic. It's not the sole reason, but man, there are a lot of people in a lot of pain as we try to come out of this thing. Many of us are trying to deal with just life-work balance alone and try to figure out how to re-enter the workforce and go back after the virus. And as we go back, many of us are missing key events in our children or grandchildren's lives. Some of us may be dealing with an aging parent. Some people in here may have even lost somebody to the virus or to some other illness. All of this is happening at a crazy time when there is this decline in civility that is almost hard to describe. If you're out here in the West, but I mean, climate control is an issue everywhere, but it seems particularly evident out West here. I just read the other day that the frickin' moon is wobbling around, and that's going to create some sort of tidal problem. And I'm leaving here to go to Las Vegas to speak tomorrow, but you know, if you've flown into Las Vegas lately and you go over Lake Mead, if you come from this part of the country, man, it is heartbreaking, the effects of this drought. And you can't pick up a financial periodical these days without seeing some reference to maybe an impending housing bust. So let me ask you something. Old school poll, how many of you are under stress? Yeah. If I do this in a small room, and some of you have been in the small rooms where I've done this in the past, so thank you for sitting through it again, but everybody's hand goes up. Because you can't be a disciple and spread the good news of the organized construction industry without being under stress if you really care. And there are really sort of three types of things that lead to stress. And again, stress is pretty normal in the organized construction industry. I've done these classes all over North America and Canada, and these are just some of the things you hear. But with respect to external and societal and cultural stresses, those of us that work in this industry, we're dealing with people that are trying to take us out. Again, regardless of what your political views are, there's probably people on both sides that are doing this, but they hate you enough that they're trying to eliminate you. There are a lot of people in a lot of jobs that aren't dealing with something like this. Sometimes it seems like almost the whole world is against us. Certainly the media, business. In some parts of the country, in some parts of the provinces, there are actually religious or cultural reasons why people don't like unions. And we have not done a very good job with our own public image. We have often what they call in the industry a charred public image. There are also internal and organizational things that can lead to stress. If you came from the field and you could look up at the end of the day at the work you did and sort of know that you did a decent day's work, that's a good feeling. But if you've transitioned into some representational or office job, man, sometimes you come home you go to work with a to-do list, you come home, you're driving home, you haven't touched one thing on that list, and you got a longer frickin' list of completely different things. And that is tough if you're doing the Lord's work. And I'm going to tell a story at the end of this thing that if I'm already crying now, you guys are in for some entertainment. Many of you are juggling with too many responsibilities. You have too much coming at you. Some of you are doing some stuff that you feel like you're told to do, and you may not feel that you're always supported in your work. This always trips me out in our movement, and I often see us at our best, working our hardest, getting most creative when we're trying to take one another out politically. It is a trip. Theoretically, we're supposed to all be on the same team, but man, you want to see somebody get creative. Politics is a problem. Some of our members, the president just talked about, are struggling. And if you are in a position where you are responsible for those people or feel that you are, that is a tough position to be in. Sometimes our own members, for those of us on the union side, most of you on the contractor side, I think, went through the apprenticeship, but I mean, some of our own members don't even like those of us that are in representation because they feel like we got it too good. I love this labor management conference. I rarely see this kind of harmony. It's one of the coolest things I've seen in the industry. But sometimes we fight with one another, and that can cause stress. And I love being in big rooms like this because I can say this unequivocally with 100% confidence. But there are people in this room that hate each other's guts. And it's always a trip when I say that in a room like this because you can see people like, see that guy at the end of the row? Everywhere I've been, except at the building trades, I've had someone that lived to take me out. if they spent half as much time just doing their frickin' job as they do trying to take me out, they'd have been king of the world. But our political nature and something about this, I mean, if you're dealing with this, it adds stress. I've never done this presentation in a small room, really, where someone hasn't cried. It's often me, but someone usually cries. And this is the part where it often happens. Because you're asking people about what gives them stress from a family standpoint. When you are doing disciple-like mission work, the job often always comes first. One blessing of the pandemic is this has been less of a problem, but many of us are on the road way too much. And that has come at a cost, often with a relationship with our kids or maybe our grandkids or spouse. Sometimes we come home with a bad attitude and the consequence that everything that brings with it. We already talked about this. Now with technology, man, it seems like we are always on this leash. And this is a big one. Sometimes we come home and we treat the people closest to us the worst. When I was in Local 11 in the IBW, just about 350 miles south here, working as a tradesperson, as a journeyman electrician, and then I went to work for the local union. I worked with one of the best organizers in the business. This guy had like messianic charisma. We would walk on job sites and people would just gather around him. We'd go into trailers on a lot of top-down visits to talk to open shop employers, and we would catch every F-bomb in the world and all the world's worst behavior. And this cat was unflappable. He always applied the golden rule. He treated people well even if it wasn't reciprocated. We had had a particularly bad meeting the day before. We're walking down Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena. His phone rings, pulls it out. And back when we had Blackberries, he says, "What? God damn it, I told you never to call me here. Is this an emergency? No. Don't frickin' do that again." Sticks the phone back in his pocket. We're walking down the street. I said, "What was that, one of those a-hole open shop employers?" He says, "No." I said, "Who was it?" He said, "It was my wife." I said, "Dude, I know your wife. She would take a bullet for you. I see you every day. People treat you like crap. You treat them like gold. And then you talk to her like that. That causes stress. And stress, again, if you're doing disciple-like work, is normal. But if it goes unchecked, it leads to burnout. And burnout is dangerous and can often lead to the stuff that President Dean was just talking about. Burnout is a state of emotional and mental and physical exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. And if it goes unchecked, the consequences can be bad. And sometimes it's helpful just to think about it like this. But if you are, again, in this type of work, if you are in the organized construction industry, you might feel like this, like an 8-ounce glass with a couple of gallons being poured into it. That is pretty normal. But if that transitions to something like this, where it just feels like the tank is empty, then you need to take note. And it's not uncommon, really, to switch kind of back and forth between the two. But if you're feeling any of this too often, you may want to take some notes. So the difference between stress and burnout is pretty simple. Stress is characterized by over-engagement. Emotions are overreactive. I've almost lost it 3 times, and I'm only 10 minutes into this thing. I'm under a lot of stress. I am an emotional guy. It produces hyperactivity and anxiety, and you can see that I can't stand still. These are all the things that are sort of associated with stress. If you're under stress, the consequence of it can be physical. You can end up on a gurney, going into the ER room. But if you are burned out, it is a very different feeling. It is characterized not by over-engagement, but by disengagement. Your emotions are blunted. One good sign is, if I was fully burnt out, I couldn't cry right now if I wanted to. But it produces this feeling of hopelessness, maybe like nothing that you do matters. You may wonder even if your work matters anymore. And the damage from being burnt out when you get to this stage is emotional. So if you're under stress, you can end up on a gurney again, being wheeled into ER to have your chest cracked. But if you're burnt out, you may find yourself wondering if life is even worth living, standing out on a ledge somewhere. It's helpful to know what the causes of burnout are, and there's really sort of three of them. There are work-related causes, and this is just of burnout in general, not in the construction industry, just in burnout in general. But there are work-related causes of burnout. Anybody in here downright irritated by the fact that you get too many pats on the back, too many thank yous? Does that happen a lot in your industry? It doesn't on the union side, I can tell you that, on labor side. It's part of our machismo, man, but this is not something that we get a lot of, recognition for our good work. This is a cause of work-related burnout. Working in a chaotic environment, we already established that many of you are on that kind of landscape. And some of us, again, especially that came from the field, there are unclear or crazy demanding job expectations. These are work-related causes of burnout. There are lifestyle causes of burnout. Working too much, anybody in here over-socialized, over-relaxed? Too much time on your hands to just do what you want? So, somebody's hand went up, I think. Yeah, retiree. That's never happened before, actually. But for most of us, we're at this too much. Being expected to be too many things to too many people. Anybody in here over-rested? Get too much sleep? So if you don't get enough sleep, especially as we're starting to come out of this pandemic and maybe be back out on the road more, this is a lifestyle cause of burnout. And then there are personality causes of burnout. Now, but if you have perfectionist tendencies, if you need to be in control all the time, if you're a high-achieving type A personality, these are the personality causes of burnout. And I would make the case that most of you in this room probably line up for all three of these categories and most of the things within them pretty well, which means that you are susceptible to burnout. Thankfully, there are things that you can do to prevent burnout, and I'll tell you what I did. I first got to DC from Los Angeles in 2005. Left my local union to go back for the IBEW International, and when I went back to DC, I was essentially a teetotaler. I didn't really drink at all. Sometimes on the weekends, but not much, not every weekend. But I moved back to DC in January, and it was cold, and it was miserable. My wife stayed behind in California because we weren't fully sure we were going to make the move. I was working 10, 12, 14 hours a day. I was coming home one night on the metro, walking to my apartment in Cleveland Park, part of DC, and I walked by this grocery store that had a bottle of wine in the window. And I just thought to myself, it's like I had a little cloud over my head, and I thought, a guy should be able, that's working as hard as I am, buy a bottle of wine, go home on a Monday night, have a glass of wine. That's what I did. And when I got home and poured that glass, I was right. It felt good. Tuesday night I came home, I poured a glass and a half. Wednesday night I came home, I poured 2 glasses. Bottle was empty. Thursday I went and bought another bottle. Friday I went and bought another bottle. It didn't go quite that quick. I'm compressing the story. But this, or its substance equivalent of it, has taken some of the best out in our industry. There are horror stories about what this has done to people. I am a person that probably should quit. I haven't been able to do it, but I try to control it. But my only message to you is, and again, it was timely given the president's comments, this ain't the path forward or anything like it. Normally in a smaller room, I challenge people to take an issue with that, but you guys scare me, so I'm not going to give you that opportunity. Thankfully, there are some things that the experts say that you can do to prevent burnout. And these are where you may want to take some notes if this resonates with you at all. But what they will tell you is, again, if you are doing this movement-oriented work, when you get up in the morning, that is the one part of the day where you have complete control. As the day goes on, it tends to deteriorate, and you lose less and less control. So start the day off right. Whatever you do, first thing in the morning, make sure that it's something that you enjoy doing. It could be you like to read. It could be that you like to meditate. It could be that you want to pray. It could be that you listen to music. Work out. But do something that you want to do for that first 5, 10, 15 minutes while you're in complete control. Every day. Start the day off right and end it right too, if you can. You're usually tired. It's not as optimal. But man, when you put your head down, just before you put your head down on the pillow, try to end the day the right way too. This one's always tough to talk about, but if our body really is our vessel to get through this life, then you also got to take care of yourself. To the degree this is analogous to athletics, we need you again on your field at your best. So if you can, see if you can't incorporate a little bit of exercise. If the food we eat really is our fuel, once in a while, have an apple. I am the world's worst at this. I have the world's worst frickin' diet. But every once in a while, like I said, once a week, eat some broccoli. Do something to try to take care of yourself a little better. Take the stairs when you can. This one's a lot easier to talk about than it is to actually do. But you've got to learn the power of no. Somebody yell something? You've got to learn the power of no. Again, much easier to say than it is to do. But saying no is extraordinarily liberating. And if you've already got too much coming at you, once in a while, you've got to say enough. I can't take anything else on. And when you say no, you will find that it actually frees you up a little bit more to say yes. So again, one of the top things to help overcome burnout, you have to take a break from technology. I left my phone over there on the table, but for me, my iPhone is like crack cocaine. I am looking at that thing all the time. When I was with the AFL-CIO and Liz Schuler's chief of staff, again, I was working 14, 16 hours a day sometimes. I'd come home at the end of the day. My wife, who was a teacher, sometimes would make supper. We'd be sitting there at the dining room table. I was pretty good about knowing that I had been gone for a long time, that I had an obligation to come home and give her some attention. I'd ask her how her day was going. She'd start talking to me. I'd look in her eyes, nod my head, pretend I was interested. No, I sincerely was trying to listen. But every once in a while, and I never would break eye contact, I'd look right in her eyes. But as soon as she averted my eyes to look down at her plate, I got pretty good at, I would be sitting there, we had a tablecloth, I could just coolly slide my phone out, look down to see if I got any life-saving texts or anything. She'd be like, really? You've been gone 14 hours. You can't give me 5 minutes. I'm like, no, baby, I'm listening, I'm multitasking. But it isn't cool. Take a break from technology. Put your phone down for some periods of time. At the very least, don't cuddle with it at night. Don't sleep with it. It is a big part of reducing your stress and preventing burnout. Find something new to do. The experts will tell you that, and for all, if we asked the room today, we'd hear 100 of them. Learn to play the guitar or a new instrument. Learn a new language. Write poetry. Do something. Gardening. Ride a Harley. Climb a mountain. But find something new and creative to do that is not connected to your work. I don't do it as much as I used to, but I do like riding a bike. Had a Road King for many years. I was driving through South Dakota to the rally one year on Highway 14, and I got to thinking, a cat should be able to, I was under no illusion that you could compose an email while you were going 60 miles an hour on your bike with no helmet on. But I thought I could probably review it. There was no one else on the road. That does not work. So find something new to do. Take up paddleboarding, but do something that takes you away from the work. And if nothing else, think about that Albert Schweitzer quote and tap into to whatever force it is that sort of lit your passion in the first place. Don't be afraid to rely on some coworker or colleague to reignite that flame. And lastly, you've got to learn to accept the things you cannot change, and sort of the power of the serenity prayer. But you need to have the peace and the serenity to understand the things that you cannot change, and the fortitude and the courage to adjust the things you can. And then you have to have the ability to decipher between the two. Because there is some amount of this that you're not going to be able to change. And you're not going to be able to affect, and you're sure as hell not going to do it if you're burnout or not operating at 100%. So don't be afraid to come off the field and take a knee and recognize that just some of this is hard. I was sitting in a bar in Washington, D.C. at the Washington Hilton right after I left the IBW to go over to the AFL-CIO to work with then Secretary Treasurer Schuler, with a guy named Jeff Grabelski, who was a mentor of mine from Cornell University, academic, great guy. Some of you in the room probably know him. And we were just talking over a glass of bourbon. And he said to me, he said, "Kirk, how's it going over there at the AFL-CIO?" And man, I took the opportunity to unload. I went on and on and on about everything that I didn't like about being over there. I love Liz. She was wonderful. She's the best person in the world to work for. But I was a building trades guy at the AFL-CIO, and I wasn't fitting in. And I complained about the politics. I complained about the policy. I complained about my observations around organizing. And Jeff Grabelski, if any of you know him, is a quintessential listener. He just sat there, listened to me whine. But after about 20 minutes, he never interrupted me once. He picks up this cocktail napkin while I'm talking and pulls out a pen, and he starts doodling. And I'm thinking, what the hell? I'm in the middle of my story here. And finally, it irritated me enough. I said, "What are you doing?" He had drawn just a circle. He said, "Well, this is your problem." I said, "That's my problem? A frickin' circle? This is why I hate academics." He said, "This is everything that you're talking about is your sphere of interest." He says, "You're into the organizing, you're into policy, you're into politics." He said, "But you work in the Secretary Treasurer's office." He said, "What do you control?" I said, "We don't control anything." He said, "Sure you do. Think about it." I said, "Well, President Trump gives Secretary Treasurer Schuler a lot of leeway with respect to the budget." He said, "What could you do tomorrow morning that you have complete control of?" I said, "I don't know, nothing that matters." He said, "What? What could you do tomorrow morning?" I said, "Well, I think I could go into the office and build a new fitness center." He says, "Does the AFL-CIO need a new fitness center?" I said, "Yeah, we do." one we have is a shame. He said, go build a new fitness center. And then he drew another circle. And he said, and that will be your sphere of control. And I went in the next day and started working on building I put everything else aside and started working on building this new fitness center. I got it paid for by somebody else. I took President Trump's parking space to do it. It was no small accomplishment. Jeff says, if you continue to just focus on the things that you do control, you will find out that your sphere of control grows and grows. And I cannot think about that story, about Jeff, about the things that we do control without thinking about my own dad. He was a quintessential greatest generation building trades guy. He was born during the Great War, lived through the Great Depression, fought in World War II in combat, fought in Korea, then came back and had a 55-year career in the IBW. And like a lot of people of his generation, he didn't have a lot of appetite for any of my teenage belly aching, but there was nothing that old wireman couldn't do. He built me a gym in the corner of our oversized West Los Angeles garage. He even made a weight bench out of 3/4-inch galvanized conduit. When the world ends, that weight bench will still be standing. I was out there working out one day, and we never talked about anything too heavy. That was just the relationship. We probably wouldn't have agreed anyway. But I was out there working out when I was in high school, and he was out there puttering around. We could talk about the Dodgers or the Rams or the Lakers or the weather, but that was about it. But this one day, he said to me while he was working, he said, hey son, how's it going? I couldn't believe it. Much like I did with Jeff Grabelski, I took that opportunity to just unload. Again, he had his back to me, he was puttering away, and I started talking about everything that was wrong in my life. Everybody that was screwing up my life. I talked about my idiotic varsity football coach that didn't have an appreciation for my budding NFL talent. I talked about some stupid high school girls that just didn't understand how wonderful I was. I talked about my idiotic algebra teacher that somehow thought that a D- wasn't good enough in Algebra 2. I talked about my stupid friends. I went on and on. And for once, my old man actually seemed to be listening. He actually even asked me some follow-up questions. He seemed to be picking up what I was putting down. But when I finished, he didn't say anything. Dead silence. I said, Dad, did you hear me? He said, yeah. That's it? He says, yeah, he says, football coach is a moron, math teacher's an idiot, girls are stupid. He says, it sounds like you're having a rough time. I said, is that all you got? He said, yeah. Then after a minute or two, he said, well, unless, of course, you want to know what the problem is. I said, oh, really? You think you know what the problem is with all those people that are causing me grief? Then he turned around for the first time and he kind of abruptly said, no. I don't think I know. I know I know. Then I said, oh, really? Well, why don't you just enlighten me? I'm going to give you a little advice. There's not many of them left, but if you know any World War II vets that spend 50 plus years in the trade, don't talk to them like that. But that day, my dad didn't get mad. He just said, are you sure you want to know? I said, yeah, I want to know, knowing full well there was no way he could possibly know what the source of all my problems were. Then he came over to me and he took his finger, I'll never forget it, and he hooked it into the sleeve of this Ohio State cutoff sweatshirt I used to wear because I thought it made me look buffed. And he just started tugging. And he took me over to the corner of that room where he had built the gym, and there was a speed bag like a fighter would use, and behind that speed bag was a floor-to-ceiling mirror. And he put his arm around me. And he looked into the mirror, and then he pointed. He said, "You look in here, and you will find the source of everything that ails you." And he said, "And here's a really cool thing. If you look in here long enough, you'll find most of the solutions too." There is so much about our world that we can't control. But how we spend our mornings, how we deal with technology, how we treat other people, whether or not we find something new to do, when we decide to come off the field and take a break, that is completely within our control. We are headed into, much of this conference has been about the fact that we are heading into a time of extraordinary opportunity. And I believe we are poised pretty well to take advantage of that opportunity. But for us to do it, we need the people in this room, again, to be at the top of their game, both mentally, physically, and spiritually. It has been a genuine honor to be with you this week and this morning. I meant what I said. I think you are all doing righteous work. You are the modern day disciples, maybe not in a biblical sense, but in a spiritual way. There is no better job, there is no better calling than the positions that you've got right now. God bless North America's ironworkers. God bless the contractors in this room. God bless Impact, and God bless all of you. Thank you.